ever have a question about your cunt that you were too embarrassed to pose? Like, if I don't have sex for the next 8 years, will my pussy hole close? Well, buckle up, school's in session. These sex pros have planned a lesson, 'cause cunts aren't just for reproduction. Whether you were born with it or it's under construction, open your ears, 'cause the Clam Jam's got you covered. The Clam Jam.
Hello and welcome to the Clam Jam. I'm Vienna, the consultant, your vagina's consultant, and host of the Clam Jam. And at this angle, it looks like I have ears from the photo behind me, or painting, rather. Here we are. Welcome back. It's been a minute since we've been here. I apologize, but we're back. Hooray! And I have a really exciting episode for you. We are joined today by Amy Merrill of Plan C Pills. And in her honor, I have worn the Abortion Diva shirt that says, "Pro mind your damn business." So check out Abortion Diva if you don't know her, and hopefully she'll be on the pod in sometime in the future. But today we're going to be talking with Amy, who is one of the co-founders of Plan C Pills. And if you're not familiar with Plan C Pills, you're going to learn all about them. But there's a good chance you've heard about Plan C Pills a lot recently, especially given what has recently happened in Texas with SB 8 and just, limitations to abortion access in general. So this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart and has been for many years as an abortion doula and an abortion advocate and someone who really believes in self-managed abortion. So we're going to get into all of that today. Amy will be joining me in just a second. Just a tiny bit about Amy. She is the co-founder and digital director of Plan C, an information campaign catalyzing equitable abortion pill access in the US. Amy serves as a designer and strategist in her purpose-driven design studio, Eyes Open, which she runs with her partner. She previously co-founded impact travel startup Journey, wejourney.co, after a decade in social change work and a desire to create more connection between online and offline experiences. Amy serves as an advisor and artist in residence at the Jane Club, hooray for the Jane Club, and writes and performs music with her partner in a post-apocalyptic space opera, post-apocalyptic space opera, formerly Alien. We might have to talk about that. Amy, welcome. Very exciting. Glad to be there.
So many different things that we could talk about today.
So many things I love. Well, thank you for being here. Again, shout out. Maybe we'll talk about the Jane Club at the end, but that's how I got to formally meet you, is through the Jane Club, which we are both involved with. But yes, thank you for being here. As already mentioned, our main topic here today is Plan C Pills, but maybe we'll talk about formerly Alien as well.
They're all related, believe it or not. They all have some kind of futurism in common.
I like it. And I love the cat in the background.
Yeah, she wants a new nap zone. She's done with that place.
Cats, they know to take care of themselves. Well, I gave a couple of sentences about you, but I'm sure there's many more things. The first thing, of course, is Plan C. How did we get here? How did you come to be one of the co-founders of this project?
Yeah. Plan C was founded about 6 years ago, and I was working in other kinds of other related issues. I've been working on anti-human trafficking and anti-sex slavery for the 4 years before that. So I was already working on these issues, these problems that had to do with the control over women's bodies, really. That's a through line, is that, here I am sitting down every day to think about this particular issue where bodies are controlled and where sexuality is misunderstood and it's twisted and contorted. And then there's this, trafficking industry around it. And then I I'd been focusing on Southeast Asia. The organization I was working with was focused on activism over in Southeast Asia. And then I started to pay attention back at home and not only look at, how does that issue show up at home, but also what are all of the complications that we see in our own culture, in our own society, having to do with restriction on bodies and confusion of sexuality and all those sorts of things. And I got a chance to sit down with a woman named Francine Coito when I moved to LA. She is founder of something called the Pacific Women's Health Institute. That was basically one of the first organizations that was talking about women's health as its own sector. lo and behold, it's a particular area of health that needs some kind of special treatment and research. And she told me in our 1 hour lunch, she explained the situation with abortion pills. And by the end, my jaw was on the floor. I just couldn't believe that not only did I, as an activist in a reproductive health adjacent issue, I didn't understand what a medication abortion was fully, because I'd never had one and I hadn't really paid attention. And then she told me the story of how these safe, effective pills had been restricted from people by politics. Really, that when they came to this country, first they were recognized as, oh my gosh, here's an incredible new health technology that's going to change the landscape. And instead, they got stamped down with restrictions. They can't even be in a pharmacy like the 20,000 other medications that we can pick up because a doctor called it in. And they're having to be handed over by a provider in a very specific kind of appointment. And she's laying this all out for me. And I'm just going, oh my gosh, what can we do? What needs to happen? This is a game changer, right? This is an incredible development. And she said, I think I need a website. I think we need to just put up a website that starts to educate people about abortion pills. And I said, I know how to design websites. Let's go. Let's do it. That's something I do. And so giving you the semi-long version of the story, just for all the context. So then we spent the next 1.5 years asking lawyers, can we put up a website? Can we talk about this thing? Especially, can we talk about where people are finding them on their own? Can we talk about online pharmacies? What's the deal with online pharmacies? You know, there's so many questions to be answered that really no one was taking a close look at, or at least we weren't seeing other people looking at this situation. We just saw a major opportunity with normalizing, destigmatizing, introducing this method as something that could really help people. And it could be affordable, and it could be private and convenient, and it could basically like sidestep all of the debate, all of the kind of mess around clinic access, clinic closures, providers getting regulated on, you know, all of the things that are being done right now to abortion access under political strategies. We could start to approach it a different way and just publish information on what's available for someone to safely do this on their own. So as we, you know, got our website up, as we got running, we started to share this information. We navigated all sorts of things, as you can imagine, of still people not being sure about this or not really understanding it, which is fine. Whenever you're talking about something new, there are plenty of nuances to understand and work out and communicate them so that people can receive the information with trust and with, you know, feeling like it's for them. So we navigated all that. And lo and behold, when the pandemic hit, telehealth became mandatory. Telehealth became how we had to get our care. So here we were sitting on this method that is basically telehealth or self-reliant, and the pandemic shifts our entire country's view of what's normal into needing that kind of access, and it ushered in a whole new reality of abortion pill access. It really caused people to start to look at the landscape and say, why are these pills so restricted? Why can't I have them in my medicine cabinet, let alone pick them up from a pharmacy when I need them? What is happening? What is the story of these pills? And we really were able to be on the front of this wave of people seeing it differently and really wanting to understand and have access to this method in a way that was sort of unprecedented. That's my relationship to it. Obviously, there's so much else that we can talk about, but basically in the past year, we've seen incredible, mostly female-founded telehealth startups come to market to serve half the country. And then we've seen half the country really struggle with continued restrictions on abortion access. And we can get into that and talk about what's still available to people in restricted states. But that's really what's happening right now, is this modern method that is available all around the world is now truly a part of someone's set of options in the US. And yet still there's plenty of work to do. There's plenty of navigating ahead of us.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you for that synopsis. It's great. I mean, yes, we're going to get into all kinds of things there. It's really interesting to me, and like the pandemic and the impact that the pandemic has had on medicine, full stop, and especially the telemedicine part, because you exist, like you said, you existed before that. I mean, the internet, of course, as we all know, has changed how we receive information in so many different ways. And I know, like personally, for my own research and my own like being in this space, there's all kinds of information on the internet about abortion and about abortion pills, and some of it is reliable and some of it is not. You also come in the history of people like, or organizations like Women on Web and Women on Water. So if people, I think it's Women on Water or Women on Waves.
Women on Waves, yeah.
Yeah, which is like, they do something similar but different, right? Where they provide, like Women on Waves, for those who don't know, started as a project basically off the coast of like Mexico, was it? Or just it was a woman who was a doctor in a ship, right? And she would park international, not park, you don't park a boat, but anchor in international waters and have a big sign that says like, if you want an abortion, come here, off the coast of countries where abortion was completely illegal. And then you could go out there and get an abortion and go back home and it would still like technically be completely legal. And that evolved, I think, into Women on Web, which was like providing abortion pills internationally to places that it was not available. But my understanding is Women on Web did not serve the US, and maybe that's changed specifically because abortion is legal here, regardless of if it's accessible, it is technically legal. So there have been, of course, like other places where people doing something similar, but you're also doing something a little bit different than either of those organizations. Yeah. I'm so glad you brought up Rebecca Gompert. She's the physician that was on that boat. There's a documentary called Vessel for anyone who wants. It's probably what you're referencing. This documentary is incredible. It shows, half of the reason she was doing that was to give safe abortions to people who needed them in international waters. Half of it was to prove how arbitrary borders are, right? That something can be illegal here and legal here. Like, okay, it's a wave.
Yeah. So what happened was, again, this is a method that's been around for 20 plus years, FDA approved, and 30 years total. It's been around for a long time. There's a lot of data behind these statements that it's safe and effective, for example. And Rebecca, the whole time, has been at the very front of the movement, pushing for access and saying, yeah, why can't I do this? I'm a doctor, I'm serving patients. Why can't I put this in the mail? And more recently, she launched Aid Access, which is, it's not Women on Web or Women on Waves. It's a separate organization. It serves the US and other places. She did wait a long time. She watched the US and said, to your point, abortion's supposedly legal. You folks in the US need to get your act together and take care of this. And then nothing changed, or things got worse. And so she finally decided to serve the US. And now that is a #1 resource for states that have restrictions. And we can talk about, where that lands in terms of someone's personal risk or how that looks, because that's a real place of confusion and fear. Again, understandably so. Also important to note that these laws are strategies to create fear and confusion. So we have to just be calling it like it is these days and, pushing back, challenging the status quo, because the laws are illegitimate and they're unconstitutional. And it's time to just get people the healthcare that they need, or help them know how to find it and take care of themselves, which we also have a right to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think we should like take a moment and kind of like sidestep back up a little bit and talk about self-managed abortion and talk about the pills involved in medication abortion, because actually I was on like some pro-life website recently, because I like to check out what people are up to, and they were referring to it as chemical abortion. I was like, oh, like cute how you're doing that. I mean, technically, sure. But to your point, these medications have been around for a very long time. One of the books I had to read for my holistic reproductive health practitioner program was The Moral Property of Women, which comes out of the phrase when we developed it's Rue 486, right? Is the
Rue 486, yeah.
Okay, I always forget the exact numbers, but it was developed, it's mifepristone, right? It is the it's a progesterone blocker, essentially. It's the first pill you take in a medication abortion. And it was deemed the moral property of women in France. And like, this is something that you cannot take away from people now that we have it. It is something that is like intrinsic to healthcare. And again, like this idea, when we talk about self-managed abortion just means like you as the person having the abortion are also managing the abortion. And most people start to think about coat hangers, I think, right? Like, or we go back to this idea of like, which is a whole other topic that maybe we don't have time for, but this idea that prior to Roe v. Wade, abortion was like super dangerous and people died all the time. And that is true in some cases, but also not entirely, not the whole story. And when we're talking about abortion today and self-managed abortion today, generally speaking, we're specifically talking about taking two different kinds of pills. The first one, mifepristone or Mifeprex, and then the second one is misoprostol. And the first one stops the pregnancy from progressing, right? So progesterone blockers, progesterone does all kinds of things, but it's key for pregnancy. And then the misoprostol actually is what causes the uterus to contract and eliminate the products of conception. So those are two things. But like literally right before we started recording, my mom called and was like, "What are you up to?" I was like, "I'm recording this thing." And I mentioned it briefly. "Hi, Mom." She's going to watch this later. She's like, "It's so dangerous." I'm like, "It's actually super, super safe." So with all that being said, can you like speak to some of the research around this and the fact that like it is recognized by the World Health Organization as like one of the safest things you can do when it comes to reproductive care?
Yeah, exactly. And again, I get it, because we live in a culture where we can't always trust what we hear. And so you hear something like, self-managing an abortion at home with medicines, like, wow, that could, it could be scary if it was actually dangerous. But you're absolutely right. We're in a new era where, thank goodness, no matter what happens, we're not going back to a time where there's going to be some kind of a, back alley, like an industry for underground, whatever. It's so safe and it's so effective, especially when it's done early, especially when someone has all the information available to them. And there is, at this point, so much research to back that up, that, yeah, exactly as you described, the World Health Organization calls these essential medicines. They're used by millions of people all around the world to self-manage every year. And just in general, this method is becoming more and more popular, we believe, because of its convenience and its cost and the control someone has over when and where and how. We've seen data that 90% of abortions in Canada right now are with pills instead of aspiration. So it's just moving in that direction overall. And that's one of the biggest things that we do, is dispel misconceptions and share this kind of research very publicly so that people understand where we're coming from when we say it's so safe and effective. It's again, we do that with a lot of care, because we know that depending on someone's personal situation, they might have extra reason to mistrust the system, or they have particular health concerns. Our job is to share everything that we can. All of our FAQs, all of our resources on our site are all geared toward helping someone make a decision that's best for them, and so that they can assess everything and then figure out where they want to go from here. It's not just promoting one method and saying this is the end all be all. It's really saying, if you're choosing, here's what you need to know, here's how you can make that decision, and then here's how to be supported in your decision if you're doing this on your own. And that even goes so far as risk factors, the very small percentage of the time that someone might experience complications. There's information in our FAQs that talks to people about what they should look out for and what should happen next. And really the idea, it's I guess, when I take myself out of the weeds of it and the technical of it, it is really to help someone feel like they are making this decision with confidence and with the care of the people providing the information or providing the service, and that they have everything they need. And that's what someone deserves. That's what, we have if we're lucky, we have a long life and a long reproductive health journey. And this might be a decision someone makes at one point in their journey, and they might not make it at another point. And we're just trying to respect and appreciate exactly where someone's at as they're making this decision, whatever cocktail of emotions is happening within themselves, and give them everything that we know, because this information isn't ours to hold. This is a collective body of information that, especially in the wake of something like SB 8 in Texas, we finally feel like it's being taken by the community and taken forward into, developing better systems and sharing it out more publicly.
Yeah.
So I hope that answers your question about self-managed. I'm happy to go into detail about any part of it.
For sure. I mean, I think from knowing, like, again, which is another subject, but like the history of abortion in the world, in the human population, and also in the US specifically, abortion has not always been illegal. In fact, it's only been illegal for about 100 years. And that was like between like the late, late 1800s until the 70s with like 72 with Roe v. Wade. So, or 73, dates, not my strong point. But it was only about 100 years. And it was a calculated, again, all of these are political moves that are then turned into moral arguments and ethical arguments for sure. But there's no real medical stance that backs up this idea that abortion is dangerous or abortion is wrong or it's anything but just a thing we do in our bodies. And abortion used to be a very private affair and very much something that was like not in any way considered to be wrong or bad or just like a thing you did, and it was done in private. And so I think one of the amazing things about self-managed abortion is that you can kind of reclaim that history of abortion.
Yeah, that's right.
It was provided, the idea of like, which is now a gendered term, but the idea of like women's care in women's hands. It was a service that was provided to you by someone who shared your experience, by a wise woman or, a midwife or whoever. And you got to do that in a comfortable setting, hopefully, in private. And that is something that shifted dramatically with how abortion is now treated in the US. And then, of course, that goes along with both. You have to go to a clinic, you have to be in an environment that might be scary, or maybe, despite their best efforts, clinical environment isn't necessarily a comfortable environment. And then add into that people protesting in front of it, or your concerns about being seen or stigmatized by people in your community. So I think it's incredibly humane and and incredibly care focused, like patient focused.
Yes, right? Yes, exactly. We use that term often these days, is that this is patient-centered care and it's not provider-centered care. And that's a really important distinction that, again, in our convoluted medical system, we sort of lose track of like whose best interest is in mind when we look at a specific type of care, a specific treatment plan. And it might not always be the patient's. And so in this case, yes, absolutely, we're saying, okay, according to everything we know about this method, it is absolutely just as safe to put it in someone's hands and let them self-manage on their own. And if that's what they choose, then that's the kind of care that should be supported. Not, I'm going to make you do it a certain way because the book says, and it's really shifting. I think we at Plan C get to witness some incredible medical providers that are also stepping forward to rethink even how they have shown up in this space and how they have chosen to provide abortions. And, we've, especially in this in these startups that I mentioned, these telehealth startups, it's really exciting to watch these providers think about what is actually the best possible scenario for my patient, and then listen, what are they telling me? Are they telling me they like this? Turns out, yes. Turns out they're getting incredible feedback that the experience is really positive. And granted, this is after someone has already chosen that they want to do it in this manner, telehealth manner. So it is all about listening to the person and having it be more, centering the person who is seeking the care. And then, Plan C, we think a lot about like, what is our lane and where do we fit in with all of the other incredible work that's going on in the larger movement. Like, we see an opportunity for this method to be demedicalized, to be over the counter. We see a future where abortion pills could be over the counter. They're that safe and effective. And we also see why the wonderful organizations that are pushing for, better protections, better access to clinics, more traditional sets of resources are doing what they're doing too, because obviously there's a larger justice and equity question happening in this country of who gets to access abortion, which is what you're speaking to as well. So that's why it's going to take all of us. That's why we feel like what's great about the Plan C message is it's one piece of the puzzle. It's a really big, interesting piece of the puzzle because it has the potential to change the landscape of abortion access if people really understand it and adopt it and run with it. And there's a larger conversation happening here about politics and patriarchy and all the things that are sort of the systemic reasons why we're in the place that we're in. But in the meantime, we're saying, know about Plan C, take this info, know about our guide to pills, know about how to find what you need, if and when you should need it. And exactly as you described it, it helps people take the power back into their own hands to do what's best for them.
Yeah. I mean, it also, like an obvious call out is Plan B, which reminds me, like, in a couple different ways. One, like Plan C, and again, my mom will recognize this conversation from earlier, but it's like, no, it's Plan C when Plan B has already not worked. And I remember too, like being in college and Plan B being something that was not over the counter, and you had to go in and like they would give you the pill and you'd have to take it. Like it was a whole thing of like you had to be in their presence to take Plan B. And we have seen that change in the last few years or so. And I fully agree with you. I think this is definitely something that could be over the counter and easily accessible, as it should be. And it's not the only option, right? And this is not a space necessarily to go into all the options, but it's that when we're using medication abortion, it's really only appropriate in the first trimester. And then, there's other options, right? And there should be options in how you access abortion, and like the kind of abortion, and not just medication, but that is like a really key piece of the puzzle. And so much of the research that comes out of like the safety of these methods is from research done in the developing world. I'm not sure what the right term is to say, but places where like they don't have like, state-of-the-art medical facilities. It's people like, working in very different circumstances in situations where like, they don't have like a huge amount of medical resources. And so access to pills is actually like incredibly important for both abortions and also managing miscarriages. And like things like doing aspiration abortions are actually something that can be done quite simply outside of a clinic as well. So that's a little bit of a deviation from where we're here. But the next thing I wanted to ask, again, just to clarify, is so what is Plan C is an informational resource. But Plan C is not a pharmacy.
Right. Yeah, you said a few things there that I want to respond to, which were really great. So we are not a provider. We are not an online pharmacy. We don't sell pills. This is very confusing sometimes for people who come to our site wanting to order their abortion pills from us. But what we do is compile, again, the research and information that we've gathered, everything that we know is happening. And we put it all in one place, and we make sure that it's understandable and that it's user-friendly, and then we connect people to resources that exist. Now, these days, I also feel like I'm selling us short a little bit by calling it an information campaign, because we're doing so much more than that. We're basically like trying to catalyze this movement. We're like trying to just move all these pieces that need to move in order for this to be more accessible, more known, more trusted, more equitable, all those things. So we're also a movement builder. But yes, we sit in a really interesting place in the middle of all of it as a hub, pushing on all sides. And that allows us to be in places like Texas, speaking up about what we know to be true and doing it under free speech, under First Amendment rights, and we've checked that with our lawyers. The whole thing about that Texas law was that it was targeting the helpers, the folks helping with abortion. So just by the law passing, it created instant fear and confusion across all of the reproductive justice, reproductive health organizations. But from where we stand, we're going to keep talking about this because it's free speech and people deserve to know, and then they get to choose how they want to move forward from there. So yeah, that's the positioning of Plan C, and that's how we've always wanted to build it. It's also like building a brand, if that makes sense. We're building the brand of Plan C. My co-founder Victoria coined the term Plan C in the exact reason that you just described, that you're going through the mental checklist of, okay, so Plan A is birth control. What happens when birth control fails? You have Plan B, the morning after pill, which my other co-founders were on the team to bring it over the counter. So that's part of our history, is that they spent, nearly 2 decades in the trenches bringing that thing out from prescription only, like you had the experience perhaps of how it used to be. So after they had done all that work on Plan B, they started to do international work, and they saw where abortion pills were easily available. And then they, similar to me, but from a public health perspective, they looked back at the US and said, why not here? So Plan C has always been positioned, always been responding to an opportunity and positioning this brand, this information hub as a catalyst and in the center of it all. And that really gives us flexibility so that, we don't have any intention of becoming like a direct to consumer product or, getting into this. But we just, there's so many forces at work already that are moving those pieces forward. There's the entrepreneurs, there's the medical professionals, there's the researchers. We're basically like seeing the landscape from above and seeing what needs to happen and kind of operating in the center of it all. One more thing that I wanted to mention, you talked about early provision and miscarriage management. I also think that the next chapter of this movement, of this conversation, is going to involve a bit of a reframing around what is this option. Meaning, we talk. So our billboard in Texas, we drove a billboard through Texas in the weeks before SB8. We made a splash and had a whole media campaign before it went into effect. And our billboard said, "Missed period, there's a pill for that." Basically, like the missed period pill is one example of how we are part of these coalitions and these groups of people in this industry. They're starting to also kind of push at the edges of how do we talk about abortion. Like, this country is tired of talking about abortion. We've used the word abortion so many times that it's either lost its meaning or it's so charged that you can't even get away from the charge that the word abortion has. So we are starting to look at, what are some other ways you can talk about this healthcare management, this self-care. Could there be a pill that you take as soon as you know that your period is late or you missed a period, and you just get your period back and you don't even think about the word abortion? And again, everyone's comfort level is different. So for some people, they might think, oh, that's confusing because I want to know exactly what's happening in my body. I want to confirm a pregnancy and then make the choice. But for some people, it's like, no, I don't have to know. I just want to take the pills and go on with my life. So there's a lot of possibility with this method, with missed period pills, or also with advanced provision, which is just starting to happen from Aid Access, which is if someone wants this in their medicine cabinet, they can go to aidaccess.org and actually request it before they're even pregnant and have it on hand, which is also kind of revolutionary if you think about where this country's at in terms of access. So I'll pause there.
No, I love everything you shared. Speaking to that, there are places in the world where abortion is illegal, but inducing menstruation is not.
Mm-hmm.
And, I feel like Cuba might be one of them, but I could be wrong. I can't remember. But in like conversations around things like aspiration or menstrual extraction, which again is another self-management technique that's been developed like at home. This idea that like there are places where you can go to the doctor and abortion is illegal, but you can say, hey, my period is late, please induce my period. And that is an acceptable thing. So I think that's a really interesting point you bring up. And there are definitely people who like don't want to know for whatever reason and just want to like get their period. And it's a really good point because we'll go into Texas next, just a little bit more in detail, I guess, because there's so many things wrong with that, but it speaks to a larger issue, I think. But this idea that the only reason we can even conceptualize laws that say you can't have an abortion past 6 weeks is due to advancements in medical technology. Mm-hmm. The fact that you can take an at-home pregnancy test that will tell you like right after you've missed your period that you might be pregnant with that level of sensitivity is a recent development and not something like really in the last probably in my lifetime, right? In like last 30 years or less, like this ability to know reliably at home very soon that you're pregnant is not something we've had. And so therefore you can start to have these like actually bizarre arguments about like when is an abortion appropriate, because we actually know so much earlier. And it leads into other things too. Like if you know at 6 weeks that you're pregnant, and again, it's 6 weeks last period, right? Like, so from your last menstrual period, that's when they start counting gestational weeks. Mm-hmm. Ovulation tends to occur midway through from your last period, but sometimes later, depending on the length of your cycle. So, you might actually only be like technically like 3 weeks pregnant, like from conception. But how that's measured is different. but that also leads to things like people knowing very early on that they have miscarried, or that they're pregnant, you know, they were pregnant briefly and they're no longer. And that opens up all kinds of other things and complicated feelings for people around, like, you become attached to the pregnancy very quickly, especially if it's something that you desire. And you're like, I'm pregnant. Oh my God, this is very exciting. And then you get your period and it's crushing. So that's, like, I guess a little bit different from the conversation. But to that point, like, the fact that we can even know this stuff is incredibly recent in human history and in medical history as well. And then it's always really fascinating that we start to have these, like, arguments that are, like, pseudo-medical of, like, there's a heartbeat, so therefore it's a full human being and its life should be completely preserved. And it's like and then often, not always, but there are people on that side that then are very anti other scientific medical advancements. You're like, well, the only reason we have this information is because of certain medical advancements. And it's also extremely arbitrary. Like, again, super arbitrary in that regard. But with that, like, if we wanted to, like, speak a little bit more specifically about Texas, and SB 8, which has been all over. I mean, I'm sure at this point, most people watching this are familiar. But it brings up a bunch of interesting points, because I think we'll start to see some other laws similarly throughout the US. We're already seeing that come about. And then to this larger point of Plan C and sharing information, and the fact that sharing information is not illegal. And so if you could speak a little bit, I guess, like, in context of Texas, because that's our, like, most recent example, but how you fit in again as Plan C, and then how those of us who are abortion advocates can, like, reframe our fear. Those of us who live in Texas and those of us who might, know or just care about people in Texas.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just wanted to touch first. All these things are connected, right? And the nuances of SB 8, the specific language of SB 8, we can talk about. It's like a very kind of unprecedented positioning of a law. And the way that you described this picking and choosing of the science, like, there are these circumstances where people are picking and choosing what they want to believe or want to align with. That just feels symptomatic of our larger the cultural moment that we're in, this kind of, like, truthiness landscape, where and it's because people are getting their information from all these different sources, all these different trust nodes, or wherever people are going to find their facts, and then piecing together what they believe. And anyway, that's a whole other conversation we could have about the state of our society in the information in the stage of the information age that we're in, or wherever we are. And yes, so what happened last month in Texas was it's a pretty horrific law. Folks probably do know about it by now, but it basically targets the helpers of someone who's trying to access an abortion. It allows any individual to bring a civil suit against that helper in a sort of what the media is calling a bounty hunter model, which means that, like, I could sue someone who I believed helped someone get an abortion in Texas. How I found out that person even got an abortion is another question that finally people are starting to raise, is like, what kind of breach of privacy is that you could actually track down? But anyway, all that aside, it's a terrible law. You can read all about it on so many news articles. And lo and behold, what happened was that when it went into effect, instead of lawsuits happening on day one, a national outrage happened, right? An incredible response from the public happened, where the Supreme Court chose not to block this law. It went into effect, and people just shouted about it. Basically what happened on the ground was that some organizations did decide to stop offering services. Many organizations said, we can't afford to get these lawsuits, so we're going to stop giving abortions until we figure out what the heck is going on. I know at least one Planned Parenthood did get an injunction on the law, or some kind of permission to continue to offer abortions. So there is one Planned Parenthood. There's also a handful of providers that are still offering abortions. And it's a mess. I mean, it's just a mess of a situation. And yes, what we did, we saw this situation coming. We started to talk about it in July. we knew that that law was coming down the pipeline, and we said, well, you know, from where we sit at Plan C, what do people need to know? They need to know how to go online. They need to know how to self-manage. Maybe they're going to choose to drive across the border. Maybe they're going to choose to, you know, try to go to that one Planned Parenthood or whatever stays open, but really they need to know about their options to get telehealth or mailed pills. And so that's what we did. We just shared out the guide, and we continued to share information even after September 1st. The point of that law, it's a political strategy, obviously, but the point of the law was also to try to get people to stop talking. And again, with free speech, like absolutely not. We're not going to stop talking. We're not going to suddenly self-censor ourselves out of fear. You know, that's a country that I hope we never get to, where there's that kind of level of censorship. So we're continuing to share information. What we saw happening online in those weeks that followed September 1st was that every organization was continuing to share information. I mean, again, like it basically had the opposite effect, I think, that the strategist wanted, which was that instead of shutting down abortion, oh no, abortion's over in the state of Texas, it actually created this reverse effect of really like bringing abortion into the national spotlight like never before. Like I was amazed by the kinds of people and the volume of people that were all talking about abortion at the same time. Yeah. For someone like you who has been thinking about this and writing and talking about this for a while, it was an incredible like 180-degree shift, because this still has been a topic that is uncomfortable for some people to talk about publicly, or to know how they feel about it enough to talk about it publicly, or, you know, it's and what feels like happened in the month of September was that some kind of a dam broke, and finally the collective said, no more are we going to let this kind of simmer out of view of the public and allow the anti-choice side of this debate to have all the power by passing all these laws and by controlling and scaring people. It's now time for, you know, this to become more vocal, and for the folks who are pushing for choice and bodily freedoms around abortion access. It's time to get loud, because doing anything less than that is playing into a strategy that we don't want to see happen anymore. So I know this is like really political. It's like really, but that's where we're at. Yeah, I wish it wasn't, but that's just where we're at, is needing to understand the game that's afoot, so to speak, so that we can know how to show up in it with the most solid, you know, public health based, you know, empowering and reliable information that we possibly can.
Yeah, well, I fully agree. And I mean, the Texas law is unique in that it's not just like limiting abortions before 6 weeks, because like, woo, congrats, you like did a restrictive abortion law. It's what is actually the most disturbing about it to me is truly like how it's enforced, which is by private citizens suing other private citizens, setting up like quite literally, maybe not quite literally, but very much so, a witch hunt. And let's go going back to these roots of abortion and like, you know, care provision when it comes to reproductive health care. That is part of it. And who does it target, right? It's ultimately targeting marginalized communities, people of color, poorer people. That's who this ends up targeting most of the time. But I think your point about actually it's trying to silence us is an excellent one, because we do kind of get caught up, you know, in this idea of like, oh my God, they're taking away abortion and we won't have access to abortion. And it gets really hyper-focused on the access to abortion. And that is a very important part. And I don't want to undermine that at all. Yeah. But again, to a point you made earlier, and something that, you know, I know and believe, abortion isn't actually going to go anywhere. It's just a matter of who's going to be able to access it and how. And additionally, it's like, it's shutting us up. It's saying, don't talk about this, because you might be considered like aiding and abetting an abortion and you could get sued. And that is possible, right? That is a reality. But I think one, it's just so like, it seems so, if we're talking about like Americanism, which we kind of are, it seems extremely anti-American to go out and tattle on your neighbors and sue them for exercising a legal right. That's very problematic.
That's what we thought too. We're going, really? Is this the precedent that people want to set up? That suddenly we are introducing laws that have bounty hunter enforcement? Because that's going to, you know, if it works here, it's going to be tried in all sorts of other areas. And it just seems, it seems very counter to what people say they want.
Exactly. And also to the point of like, how do you know, right? Like, how do you know someone had an abortion and how do you know this person ate it? And right when they launched the website of like of reporting, right? The sun is like coming right at me. When we launched the website, which was like tattle on your friends, it it like had no accountability if you went and looked at it before it crashed. But it was just like, did someone like tell us about this abortion you heard about? And it doesn't ask for your name. It's all anonymous. It doesn't like ask you to provide supporting documentation. It's basically like, I heard that so-and-so had an abortion at 7 weeks. We should sue them. It's like, who's going to be doing the suing? Who's enforcing? All of these questions. And then again, just like scaring people. And that is where it becomes like clear. It is all political. I mean, it really comes down to this. And I think, sorry about the dog, guys. He is mad that he can't be included in this conversation. But this idea that like it is completely political. And whether or not you personally believe that abortion is something that you would do or that abortion is a good or bad thing, it is legal in this country. It is a safe and basic part of healthcare. It is a basic part of reproductive healthcare. We have been doing abortions since we've been able to get pregnant as a species, and it's not really going anywhere. So if you personally have conflicted ideas about abortion or you don't believe it should be a thing, that's fine. It would be great to have less abortions. I'm not against that idea. It's just like if people need to access them, they need to access them. And preventing people from accessing reproductive care is atrocious, and preventing people from sharing legitimate information and helping is also completely despicable. So yeah, like it is political in every way. And I love that you brought up the part of like the silencing. So the other thing I wanted to talk about too, because we're kind of like, we've been talking about it, but like talking about it more specifically, what in your mind, like being kind of in the forefront of this and like in this one particular corner, what is the future of abortion care in the US? Because I think a lot of people are very scared. And it's, again, I understand why people are scared. I am an eternal optimist about this. I think like this will backfire, honestly. But yeah, like sitting where you sit, how do you see abortion over like the next like 10, 20, 50 years in this country going?
Yeah, I do think this model, this option is so powerful that it's basically inevitable. Like you can't, it relies on, it's about the internet and access to information. It's about private shipping, quick direct shipping, which is absolutely a part of our everyday life these days. And it's it's not a second tier solution. I think that's really important, and we've already been talking about that here, but it doesn't have to be something that you are nervous about or feel like you're getting lower quality care. It potentially can be exactly the kind of care that you seek. It can be just as supportive. Maybe an important point to make too, which you touched on earlier with Plan B, but with choosing a medication abortion in a clinic, the interpretation of the FDA restrictions has been in the past that the person has to take the first pill in the clinic, but then they are sent home and they self-manage at home. This is already a method that is self-managed. We're actually kind of pushing back on that terminology in general. We're being more mindful about how we use the term self-managed, because it makes you think that it's wildly different than what's happening with a medication abortion in clinic. And it's just not, right? And so we're trying to help people understand that and be comfortable with how similar it is to the medicalized model that already exists. So in terms of the future of access, yeah, I obviously of the mindset of in the camp that believes that this is going to be the method that serves people who don't have access otherwise. I think it's again not going to be a matter of people finding back alley abortions like decades past. It's going to be about finding access to these pills and information on how to use them. And frankly, if our country continues to fail us with this piece of medical care, then of course people should just be finding what they need. It's like at that point, people just need to do what they need to do. I mean, it's already what's happening, as you mentioned, especially with marginalized communities and with folks who are already in vulnerable situations. They're being failed by a system, and they are going to need to find what they need to be okay. And the good news is this is a really great option. And it's can be really affordable and it can be really convenient. So that's what I see as the future of care. And again, that just depends on sharing out this information and destigmatizing it, destigmatizing the method and making it feel normal, like a part of everyday life. I really believe, it's funny, as I thought about this conversation, and I've been doing speaking engagements this month, I am really excited to be training my team and equipping my younger team members to be speaking on this, because this is their solution. You know, this is all of our technology. I mean, it's all of our option. It's for all of us. But I get really excited thinking about how can the younger generation really own this and run with it. Like it fits in so many ways with what people are looking for in terms of something that is, you know, facilitated by technology, that is not inflated unnecessarily in cost, that is just available to them to live their lives and to keep going and to do what they need to do. What I see happening, what I think will keep happening, is that abortion pills as a concept will move out of the medical and public health sphere and more into the collective culture, the collective consciousness. Again, as ideally just something that you have in your medicine cabinet in case you need it. It doesn't have to be such a big deal. That's my perspective, and of course everyone's experience is different, and all of the emotions that are connected to this kind of experience are absolutely valid and deserve to be cared for and heard. But I think what's going to happen in the coming decades is that fingers crossed, is that it doesn't have to be such a big deal. You know, like the debate will rage on. I don't think the debate is going to end anytime soon. But I think what's becoming clear to the public in the US is that this idea that someone else would have control over my body, my future, what happens in my body in the next 9 months from this moment is becoming unacceptable, right? It's becoming like, I think so many of those arguments that held the anti-abortion narrative in place for a while, like moral arguments or religious arguments, that sort of thing, they're falling apart in the face of not only what we believe to be true about control of our own bodies, but also what we're up against as a society, just trying to stay alive, you know, just trying to like survive a pandemic, survive a I don't want to say crashing economy, but like a really wacky economy, a huge national debt. Like we don't even know what's going to happen. And so the idea that there would be this force at play that is taking away an individual's right to choose what's best for their body, if they know what they want and they know exactly the kind of care that they seek, the idea that would be tolerated is becoming less and less believable. So all of that to say, I really do think the future is going to be about people finding what they need and taking care of their own needs and doing it with the support that's available in online and remote form when needed.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I think it is going to continue to be more accessible. I mean, ideally, right? Like it's always important, like abortion is legal, but is it accessible? And I do think accessibility is going to change. Information, right? Just again, like the internet exists. It will probably continue to exist. These medications exist. I mean, the other thing, just to also like go back to the idea of like sharing information and sharing information within communities, the history of misoprostol, and this is like, we're just like throwing in at the end, it comes out of Brazilian women who realized, where abortion was illegal, realized that if they took this ulcer medication, it would induce a miscarriage. And like, that's, I think that I love that history and this idea of like, someone figured it out and someone shared it with their community. And I mean, the same thing again with like abortion in this country pre-Roe v. Wade, when it was illegal, it was groups of like women primarily, but you know, also like male providers and also like male helpers, whoever, right, who were providing these things and providing them outside of clinics or providing them in clinics wherever, like clandestine, you know, the Janes, which are going back to the Jane Club, but like, you know, that whole organization and people just, you know, finding a way and finding a way to care for themselves and to care for each other. Because the decision, you know, I think like this idea of deciding whether or not you want to be a parent is a really big, important conversation and a really big deal. And you know, in a country that says it values, you know, family values and like believes in the family, we don't do a lot of things to support the family. And that's not to say like you shouldn't have children in this country. Absolutely not. Have the children you want to have, but you should be supported in that. And if you decide like having children is not something you want, or having more children is not what you want, that is a human right as far as I am concerned. So I agree with you. I think it'll become more accessible. I think like, again, people having, not only like a decision-making ability, like actually having a choice to make where it's like, I can choose this or I can choose that. And if I decide to choose an abortion, like I have options. It's also this idea of doing it on your own terms. And I really, and this is kind of going somewhere else, but I'm going to go with this as my like future of abortion, but the idea of what we see in like the home birth movement, right? So home birth being a thing that was also illegal and is still in some cases illegal in some parts of the country. That, you know, you have the right as a human being who gives birth to do that on your own terms. And, you know, safety being another question, but regardless, like home birth is safe. I don't want to give that impression, but you know, a birth is also very dangerous in a lot of ways. Like many, 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 many women have died in birth and throughout pregnancy. And so it's not to be taken lightly for many reasons. But again, it's not a reason to say like you should, like, it's not to say like abortion is safer, therefore you should have an abortion. It's just that proceeding with a pregnancy is a huge deal for all kinds of reasons. And again, this idea of like, you can do it safely at home. You can do it on your own terms. You can do it with people around you who care about you. Abortion doulas, shouting out the abortion doulas, right? Like the abortions that I have like sat with people through have been very lovely experiences where you're at home and you get to like, it's not necessarily physically enjoyable and perhaps you have a lot of mixed feelings, but regardless, you get to be like comfortable and have this really empowering experience that I do think is on par in a similar way with home birth. And I think, you know, a philosophical idea, but it is also a certain kind, it is a pregnancy release, as Samantha Zipporah says, who was on the Clam Jam previously. But yeah, anything that is the result of a pregnancy, like there's a pregnancy and there is not, right? It's the release of a pregnancy. And I think like seeing this more in homes and having people actually have a direct hand in their care is where this is headed. And I think that is something we should all celebrate. And I think on all sides, right? Like there's definitely a way that like pro-life and or anti-abortion and pro-abortion meet on some certain principles, whether or not we all want to admit that. But this idea that you do get to control what happens in your body and you do get to make these decisions and you get to make them in a way that's affirming to you. That's hopefully where we're headed. I have a lot of hope. And even regardless of what's happening with laws, the sun really wants to get me. I think the future is like, this is not the end.
Yeah, the solution's already here. You know, this method's already available from all 50 states. It's really important for people just to know that and to file that away for when that information is needed in whatever form it might be needed. And it's not going anywhere. So I'm really happy for this opportunity to chat about it and to hopefully we dispelled some myths and we shared some useful factoids and gave people what they need. Can I share a few things also about how people can get involved?
Yes.
Great. So yes, as you know, we have an ambassadors program. Well, it sounded a little like Wisconsin or something. Ambassadors program of volunteers who are coming to us with all different skill sets and all different abilities or capacities to get involved. And we're just kind of revamping and relaunching that program now. So we really love working with volunteers. And for something like the march happening this weekend, the March for Abortion Rights, we're equipping people with flyers and DIY stickers and things that they can hand out. We're also forging partnerships with RJ, reproductive justice organizations, with health organizations, with college campuses, anywhere that you could imagine that this information about a Plan C option could be plugged in and shared out with the community. Those are the kinds of partnerships that we're bridging right now. And we're also working directly with the medical and doula community. And we have a toolkit for providers that providers can use to get up to speed on what's possible right now. And we're here as the country continues, or as the landscape of access continues to evolve. We're going to keep shouting far and wide about online access. And please consider us a resource with anything that you might need.
Awesome. Thank you. I mean, again, the website is plancpills.org. It's an excellent resource for, again, everything that Amy just shared. Please check it out. I mean, it's been an incredible website for a number of years, and it's only continuing to get better. It's an excellent resource for anyone who's curious about this or wants to learn more about self-managed abortion and just like access. And again, remember, everyone, abortion is still legal in all 50 states in the US. It is still legal. This is not the end. But yeah, I love that you were here. I love this conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time today. We don't have any questions, so we're going to just wrap it on up. Thank you again, Amy. And I'm going to play the outro. And everyone have a great rest of your day. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to either one of us. If you want a provider kit, you know where to go. Have a great afternoon. Thank you for watching.
Thank you so much.
Your cunt is special, there's so much to love. You and your pussy should fit like hand in glove. Whether it belongs to you or your lover, there is so much to discover. See you next time, the Clam Jam's got you covered. The Clam Jam.